when we talk about computing, basically, um, you can mute yourself so that I don't get distracted. Okay, if your mic right. So we are going to go through quickly with the session. I hope you can see the screen. If you can see the screen, you can unmute and say yes, you can, and then you mute yourself back, right?
Yes,
If you
please, we can.
all right, powerful. So when we talk about computing, the first slides that we have here us talking about computers, right? So when we're talking about computing, there's a need for us to know about computers. And so you realize that the first session introduces us to what computers really are. You see, so what at all are computers? Okay, so we get to realize that computers are far beyond the square screen we see with the system unit and the keyboard. So with this session, it begins to introduce us to the concept of computers, right? Where we get to know that it is not only those ones that are actually computers, right? And that anything that has the ability to, um, how do you call it, re um, to process data and to store that data, right? uh, Even to analyze the data and produce results is also a computer, right? So those things are very, very important to knowing what a computer is. So notice the keywords that I use here, right? So I began by saying um, um, something that what first of all it's it's what it receives data, right? It receives data. Then after it receives the data, it begins to analyze it, right? It begins to calculate it, right? Because computer does a lot of calculations. So basically, it doesn't do the sort of thinking we do, right? It breaks it down into binary um, units, right? When I talk about binary, I'm talking about zeros and ones. So when don't be confused. When I say zeros and ones, to what I'm trying to talk about is the fact that it is its own alphabet system. So instead of you to use English alphabet system, right, where uh, I'm using to communicate, of which I'm using to communicate to you right now, right? The computer doesn't use those alphabets, right? It uses an alphabetic system which involves only two alphabets in a sense, right? And these alphabets is just known as 0 and 1. So imagine your A to Z, A, B, C, D up to Z. The computer also has 0 up to 1. You get it? So this is what it basically uses to do calculations because it is actually numbers, right? So whenever you talk to the computer, right, it actually doesn't see it the way you see your communication, right? It's every alphabet that you key in has its own representation, right? So when you key it in, the computer now translates. So there's a translator there, right? Which translates the alphabet, each alphabet you have typed, each of them, not the whole word, each of them. It translates it first of all into that language. We call it computer language, right? Uh, then it now understands it through that after the translation. You get it? So that is after it calculates that, right? It tries to process it, right? It is trying in human sense, we'll say brainstorm, right? So after the brainstorm, what does it do? It tries to make sense of it, right? To know what you meant by key in those things, right? And then it stores those information, right? But before it does store, it also produces back to you. Because at the end of every communication, when you are communicating with someone, right, the end of communication, there must be a word feedback. Those of us who are doing communication, right? Um, so there must be a feedback. So this is where the computer will now communicate back to you in an output format. So you give your information to the or your data, okay, your data to the computer. So it processes it and produces an output. So you what the data that you gave. So data is basically an unprocessed information. So if you come to me and instead of saying uh, I went to the mall to buy Kinke and so, and they all cost a total of 2,000 Ghana cedis. I paid, and then here's my balance. You have given me an information that you went to the mall, right? But imagine I come to you and I start saying Kinke, 2 cedis, fish, 2 cedis, pepper, 2 cedis. You see, water, 5 cedis. It's over there. What I'm doing, it's not an information, right? I'm just giving you data, but you may not know what to do with the data because to you as a human, it doesn't make sense to you, right? Unless they give it to you in the form of information, right? That's when you begin to make sense of it. But the computer takes its that data and is able to say that, oh, when you start saying think a 2 cedis, this 2 cedis, then it means that you are giving me information on a particular thing that needs to be processed. And so the computer's work is supposed to pick it, calculate it, give you a total, right? And that is how come you have computers like the POS system in the malls, right? So it's also a computer. So I'm beginning to introduce you to other form of computers that are not the traditional one that we know, which is the monitor system unit. So your thermometer, the digital thermometer that you go to the hospital and you have access to, those ones too are um, computers, right? Because they take in the data of your temperature, right? And they process it and give you an output. You get it? So there must be these keywords, right? Input, output, processing, storage. Do you get it? So this is basically the introduction to what computers are and what they are involved in, which processes they are involved in. For some reasons, the course doesn't go deep into it. I think because UGBS is a University of Ghana business course, right? And not an going to stay shallow. But there are sometimes I'm going to delve deeper because I believe you should get the understanding, right? So that you know what to say exactly or what to write. So then, because now we now know what a computer is, with in our own words, right? Let's try and see what the slides give us, right? So this is where you come and say that a computer is an electronic device. So we have to now identify what is it. Is it a wooden structure that accepts data? No. Is it um, an animal that accepts data? No. Is it a tree? No. It is an electronic device operating under the control of instructions in its own memory that can accept data, process the data according to specified rules. So the computer, what it's trying to tell you over here is just to be careful because computer, all computers don't work on their own. They don't. Even if you see a computer working on their own, it means that someone has issued an instruction to it for it to loop. When I say for a loop, um, it's a software term, right? Where um, we give instruction on the computer programmers, right? We give instructions to the computer to infinitely continue to let a particular machine run based on a software or a program. So what I'm trying to say is that it worked endlessly. It doesn't mean that no, it was working on their own, but it means that someone gave an instruction to it for it to be working continuously. So even if you go at that time and you see nobody there, it is as a result of an instruction, prior instruction that was given to it by a programmer or the user of a computer, whether a novice or a professional, right? Good. So don't let this definition get over your head, right? But in your own words, try and get the definition based on how I've explained so far. But you have to remember these keywords, right? It's an electronic device. It takes an input, it produces an output, it stores, right? And what else? Can someone add something that I said earlier on to it? I want to see if we are following. Hello? Oh, let's make it lively, okay? Let's make it lively. Let's make it lively. Let's make it lively. Someone, anyone, Mr. Chumesi, I see you.
It produces results.
Yes, perfect. Producing results. So now I see what you're doing then. That's brilliant. Okay. That's brilliant. It produces results in if you want to be technical, right? Um, you can say it produces an output. It gives an output, right? That one you are trying to flex, because it's an IT term. So when you say, before we move on, I want to add this so that it will give you an exceptional advantage, because with it you can earn extra marks. Okay, so every course has its own terminologies, right? So there's a way I will say something. It's correct too, but because of the course that we are doing at that time, there's a need to say it in another form, right? And so just embellish what you have said with the core system or something that is close, a term in the course that is close to what you said, and you just hit the nail right on the head. And that's a beautiful contribution right there by our madam. Um, so let's just keep that in mind, and we'll all do well. All right, let's move on. And so we have the definition, and you see that even with that, it has outlined the basic three functions that it needs to perform computers, right? So collects data, processing, produces information. So input, output, processing. But there's one more thing. It also stores, right? So um, no matter what device it is, it has a certain level, small amount of storage. Whether you can put your memory card there or not, every computer has a storage. You just may not be able to have access to it. But even for it to function, it means that there has been a stored instruction in it. You get it? So when you are giving, don't say that, oh, it doesn't have a memory card, so it doesn't store. So it doesn't qualify to be called a computer. No, you get it? The fact that it runs on a program means that even that program has been stored. All right, so let's take notice of that. Very important. All right, so collects data, processing, produces the output, right, or information. So notice how the data transforms to become information. You see, so when it is raw, when you give me those data and you come and say, Kinky, this one, I'll say, hey, these things, they are too raw. I don't even know what you are talking about. You see, it's in critical thinking, we'll say vague, right? Or it's vague because it's too broad. We don't know what to do with it. And it seems not to make sense to anything related, right? So that is about that That so remember these three things, and the last one, which makes it four, right? Very, very important. Is it comes in the exams a lot. That's why I'm stressing on it. What is a computer, right? And we've dealt with it. Now let's look into the data. So this is how come I been getting a lot of questions on this as to why this thing is already here. So what we are seeing on our page right now. So it's basically telling us what a data is, right? So like I was saying, you come to me and you start saying kenke 2 cities, fish 2 cities, water 5 cities. I will not know what to do with it. I don't even know what you are talking about because at that time you are just giving me raw facts, and I am not a computer to process what you are doing, right? I don't even know what you are talking about. So at that time, it's a raw data until you come and tell me that, oh, these are things, items that I bought at so so and so more. Then I'll be like, oh, okay, they are actually items you bought at so so and so more. Oh, okay, then now let's make it make sense. Okay, so what has it done? Because we need a total of it, right? It needs to make sense. And so before we can make it make sense, as soon as it makes sense, then we can say that it is now called an information. But when it doesn't make sense at that stage, when it is raw, right? Raw, not that it entirely does not make sense, but it's raw in nature, right? And that's why we call it data. So when it's the same as when you are working for Ghana Statistical Service, right? Or for instance, Ghana Statistical Service, and you have been assigned to a territory, right? Let's say Ashanti region or Volta region, right? I'm sorry for the voice, right? Today, I'm so sorry. So when you are assigned there, um, you are given a certain territory uh, to take the census on, right? So when you go there, basically you have to take the number of people in the area. So you go to classify the population. So you group them. So you have people within this age group, right? From let's say 0 to 5 years, 0 to 5 years. Then you have from let's say 6 years to 12 years. So each one has its own questionnaire that you are going to ask about them. And based on that, because it's not just about counting of the people. So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is that at the end of the day, you realize that you have so many raw facts, right? So many raw facts. That means that you have a lot of data that you may not, someone who doesn't know about what you are doing will just get it and be confused. You get it? And this is what we call data, right? So it is now the job of someone to process all the data, right? And say that, oh, uh, and say that um, I really need help with someone to help me to admit people so that I don't get distracted. Can help
I'm
me.
doing it here.
Oh, okay, that's perfect. That's why I see them vanishing. Okay, thank you, thank you. All right. Um, yes, so uh, you have someone, it's now the job of someone to focus on processing each and every classification, right? And make sense of it, right? And this is what the Ghana Statistical Service will now produce to the general public, that based on our census, we were able to know, first of all, the total number of Ghanaians, right? Within the country and outside the country, the total number is so so and so million. Within the so so and so million, we have this age bracket more than this age bracket. So we have more youth, more young people against more older people, right? And then we have more unemployed. So you see that now at that point, that data they went to the ground to gather is beginning to make sense. So that's when it turns from data into information. So coming back to the computer is the same analogy, right? So you went to the mall and you've individually gone to pick your items, and so each item has its own price, unit price, right? So you, let's say you pick, let me use Ghanaian things. Okay, so you went to pick sobolo, right? One sobolo costs one CD 20 pesos, and you went to pick five of them. You get it? Ah, and you went to pick, you went, so you were pushing your cart around. When I say your cart, I mean that basket that has the ties under when you go to the mall. So you were strolling around and you were picking your items. At the end of the whole thing, you presented your items to the cashier at the gate, right? At the door, where they will now pick everything that you have, scan it through the POS system, right? Via the QR codes or the serial codes, right? Where they will use to get the details of or the price of each product. So they are going to know the unit price. So they will key all these data that you have provided to them, right, in the form of goods that you have selected. And this is what the POS system will produce and give you results after that, right? So this is what you have here. So the data is like those items in the cart that you have chosen, right? Now, after it produces it, the POS system already has instructions that anytime someone submits these items, right, the tax, the government has given us a certain tax to for everyone to pay, for us to let every buyer that comes here to pay. So actually, this tax is added to all the goods that you buy. Then after that, if there is any discount by the company or the supermarket, it now uses that same instruction that has been given it to deduct. So that means that if it is a tax is an expense, right? Those of us doing accounting. But for those of us who are not doing accounting, when we say it is an expenses, what it means is that those unit price that you selected, a tax, because it's an expense or it's an expenses as we say in our local parlance, it means that it's going to add up to the things that you bought. So if there's a tax of 2 cedis or 2% on the goods, they will calculate the value of the 2% on the goods you bought, right? And this 2% will now turn into a value and come and add up. So maybe when we calculate that 2% on the goods you have selected on, maybe it's going to be 2 cedis. And normally it's quite insignificant, right? So it will now come and add up. That one, notice, if it is a tax, it will not subtract. It will rather come and add, right? But if it is a discount, so discount is normally issued by the companies, right? Sometimes the government can issue, but it's rare, or right, on the supermarket level, right? We see it at the port. If you work at the port or you are bringing in goods to Ghana or something, that's when you may see some of these things. Sometimes you may see discount from, anyways, but just that's just by the way. Okay. So um, if you see discount, so that means that the taxes. So we have, for instance, we have medium soda, small turkey, Caesar salad, bag of chips, cookies. If there is a tax, it will come to it will come down after the total, right, and come and add up as an expense to the total of all the goods that you have bought. So if the total of the goods was 13.12, the tax of 2 cedis will come and add up to make it 15 cedis, 12 pesos. Do you get it now? Are we seeing the screen? So it will now come and add up down there to make up 15 cedis, that means that you are paying that tax. But if there is a discount, the discount will now come down, right? And then it will, after the 15 cedis, the discount will now come and deduct. You get it? So whichever way, right? Depending on how good you are in your accounting. All right, but this is not an accounting class, all right? So yes, so it will now come and deduct and lower. So we had a discount of 5 cedis. Maybe you've been buying your regular, or maybe the last time they promised you of a discount on your next purchase or something. And you have it 5 cedis. So they will now credit you with that 5 cedis. Don't worry, okay? But the accounting students who are that, they will now add it up to you. When I say add it up, when it comes to when it comes to add up, it will actually subtract from your total. So that 15 cedis now also be reduced by 5 cedis, right? Because you have your, and this is when everything will make. So now when you pick that final thing that has all these things on it, now you see that it begins to make meaning to you. You see the thing. But when I give, if I had presented the previous one, this one, the data one here, this one, it would have not made sense to you because I'll write 20 dollars or 20 cedis, but you end up coming to pay $30. And you ask me questions if I'm the shop manager, that why did I give you, because this one, it doesn't make sense at all. Then now I'll say, oh, it was the raw data. No, so it has to make meaning. So this is when we give that final output where it begins to make sense. And we call that information, right? And the data is a raw fact. So now I believe that you can distinguish between what a raw data is vis-a-vis what an information is, right? All right. So the unprocessed information is also called the data, right? All right. So I'm really struggling here. Right. Sorry, I'm not feeling well at all. All right. So let's move on. Then we begin to let's see. Let's see. Right. So now, after knowing all this, you see, but before the data and information, in between it is a processing where the computer computes. During the processing stage, they begin to do mathematics. So because you selected 5 and each one costs 2 cedis, it will multiply 2 by 5. You get it? And that's how come. That's how it processes the items, right? Awesome. And so within this stage, this is what it does in the processing stage, inputting stage, and then the output stage. All right. Okay, so next slide. I'm going to do half of the slides. So now that we know what a computer basically does, right, let us know what its components are. Then we come to the functions of those components, and then we can call it a day, all right? All right, so uh, the computer contains many electric, and mechanical components. Now, when we say electric, we are talking about the part of the computer that deals in delivery, right, of electricity or power, right, to the computer, right? What, every computer needs to be powered by, I must have a power source, right, for it to be able to function in the first place. Because if it doesn't have, even your body has a power source, you have to eat, otherwise you will not get power to move your body, right? And so it has components that has to deal with intake of power and distribution of power across the motherboard or the component, all the other components. Now, electronic is that part that has to do with the maintenance of um, the instructions, right? In distribution of instructions across the components of the computer, right? Each part of the computer. So these are the components that has to do with the distribution of the instructions across the computer. Now the mechanical part is where the hardware that we are seeing, where uh, uh, what makes what works, right? The big things that we see there. Sometimes when you open your computer, you see those things, right? So we have the electric part, the electronic, the mechanical. I'm going to go into details later on, all right? So within all these, right, it's all called hardware because they are basically things that we can see, right, and feel, right? So the computer is made up of things that we can see, components that we can see, right? So now these components, right, are classified into, because if I say list the components, physical components of the computer, you get it. If I say list them, you list them, so because now um, new technologies are coming up to adapt to the conventional computers that we know. For instance, the traditional computer, which is like a laptop or the PC, that the desktop that we know. You see that day in, day out, new features are being added. At first, we didn't have thumbprints being added to the hardware of computers. Now they are being added, right? Yes. And then we have certain extra cables that are now being added to the ports that we have on the computer. Therefore, you will see that on the motherboard, there's a corresponding feature or features that will be on the motherboard that will support that uh, component that have been added. And so when I ask you to list, the list will go on and on and on endlessly. So there's a need for us to classify them in groups so that when we mention group, then you know which class or which group of items or devices they belong to. Are we following? Are we following? All right. So um, the first one is what? Input device, right? So now we have the items that allows us to enter data and instructions into a computer. You see, so these ones are those ones that are helping us to enter data. So, um, like I said from the beginning, the computer receives instruction. It doesn't work on its own. No matter how brilliant a computer is, it will only work when it has been given an instruction. And so any device that helps us to input or enter data, right, or instruction is what we call the input device. And we are going to look at the example. The output is where the hardware components that conveys information. So notice how data and information is being used. So whenever it's going as an output, it has become an information. So an output hardware component helps us to display information. So, like I said, the computer doesn't understand your language, and so it breaks it down. When you communicate it to it, it breaks it down into its language first, which is the binary, which is its own alphabetical system, right? Um, so that it will understand. When it finishes, it produces its result, and now with the help of a translator or an interpreter, right, it would now interpret it into human readable form, right, where it will now display it as an output, which is also an information. And these devices that help us to do that are called the output devices. And then we have the system unit. Um, the system unit, which is the case that contains the electronic component. So you see that huge case, either the monitor sits on it or it's beside the monitor. You see that it's normally huge. Nowadays, some computers, the system unit is embedded to the um, the monitor. So the monitor and then the system unit are one. And the same thing is with our phones, right? But there are some computers that have system units. This is why we are talking about it, right? So we are talking about it in general. But some computers have the system units combined to their output device. And if that's the case for um, modern computers, right? Awesome. So I believe that some of these things that we are learning, it should be updated over time because things are changing. Anyways, so we have storage devices, right? We have storage devices. So these are the records. Uh, these are um, the area that has to do with recording of our data or information. Notice it records either data or information, right? Um, records or rights. You see, so it's telling you the IT terminology that you can use instead of your normal academic uh, community language for other courses. So with IT, instead of saying recording, you can say write, and any IT professional would understand. You get it? So your ability to edit or change or record, you can say write. So whenever you see write in computers, these are what it's pretty much talking about. Okay, and then um, you see apart from that, end or reads, right? So it either does both or one of them. So end or reads, right? Or retrieves. So in the normal English balance, we say retrieves. But in IT terminology, we say what reads. Items to and from storage media. All right. All right. So these are just the storage devices, and I believe we know these things. Okay, let me talk about the last one. Communication device enables a computer to send or receive data, right? Instructions and information to and from one or more computers or mobile devices. So now that we have an input device and then we have the output device, right? A device that helps us to input the data, a device that helps us to display the result of the input data that we have done, for which is giving us an information or an output, which was basically really done through the system unit, the components within the system unit, right? The system unit is just the case, okay? It's just a case that contains every component that has to do with processing. So we have processing, input, output, and then we have storage where we can store our data or information, right? And whether we can write it or read it, right? So when I say read only or read something, it means that you don't have access to edit it, you don't have access to record it or do anything apart from what you are seeing, right? You only have the right to watch it. So, but when I talk about right, it means that you have access, you have the full access basically, right? To that thing. So there's a slight background detail I've provided. Communication devices are those ones that helps us to now you see that output that we have gotten, the output that we have gotten as a result of the input and processing, sorry, processing. Now, what do we do with them? We want to share it with other users of other computers, right? Of other networks or within our network. I'm going to explain that shortly when we go into networks, right? So you want to be able to share that with friends and your families. We will understand this better. Friends and families, right? And so the devices that help us to now communicate these ones to our friends and families to share it with them, right? Share the link, share with them. Those those devices are helping us to communicate, right? And this, so it enables to a computer to send or receive data, right? Instructions and information. So it's not limited to only information, right? It's also has to do with data, and it also has to do with instructions. So you will understand later on why it has to do with data as well, instruction and information. But just notice that it just had note that it helps us to communicate, right, with other computers or users of computers, right? Powerful. So this has to do with all the components of a computer in its classifications, right? All right. So now let's look at the pictures because I can't teach these things theory and you will not have access to some of these things. All right. So we have a printer here, right, which is an output device, right, because it produces the data you give it, right, through, let's say, Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint, any of the document writing softwares, right, or any other software that helps you to print out something. So far as it's bringing out a display or a form of a result that is showing, right? It is it is not giving data to the computer, but it's rather giving information to you. It is an output device, and a printer is an example. And so, based on that, you would realize that a scanner, which will be the direct opposite of the printer, because the scanner would be that device that would give the computer an information that, look, let me mention someone's name in the class. Madam AJ has placed a document on the scanner that is showing within the system. Should I display it for you so that you can look at it? So it is receiving the data that Madam AJ is placing inside of it. And so you can see that right there, a scanner would be an input device because it doesn't display on its own, it doesn't display. It's rather feeding the computer with the data, that document you have placed on it for it to scan, right? So it's scanning the document to show right on the monitor, but in itself, it is not an output device. All right, powerful. So because I explain these things because it escapes students a lot. So over there you have it with a printer and a scanner. All right, especially with our beginner friends and colleagues. Right. But therefore, hey, what am I saying? Therefore, um, um, with this, we get to know that a pen drive is also a storage device, right? The hard disk drive. So you see drive attached to it, then it must be a storage device. All right. So, but when we say a system unit, right? When we say a system unit, it's a combination of all of them because remember, the system unit is the case that contains all the other components that has to do with processing. So you have the processing or the processor, you have the memory, and you have the storage devices within the system unit. So when they say a system unit, the person hasn't said anything. It's too broad because we have a hard disk drive inside the system unit, right? We have the hard disk drive. We have the even the CD um, side, also the optical disc. You see, we it also accepts CDs. Um, it also accepts. It has ports for flash drives and so on, right? So it has a lot of components. So you can't say that it's entirely a processing device because it also has storage devices in it. That's what I'm trying to let you know. So if you say just system units, it is too broad. So it within it we have the hard disk drive, which is a storage device. We have the CPU, which is also inside, which is a processor, right? And then we have the the um, ROM, read-only memory side, right? Um, and so on. You get it? So it contains, it's a mother of all the things, but within it is also a motherboard. Anyways, so that's just by the way with the system units, so that you know the components within it, right? I'm teaching it in a broader perspective, not necessarily for the exam only. All right, because I believe that when you understand it, you'll be able to produce a lot of examples that are not even in the slides. All right, let's move on. So we also have the monitor here, right? The monitor, move this here. We have the monitor, and then we realize that the monitor it's a screen, right? It has a screen, and then which is a majority part of it, right? And its work is to display information that has been processed. Okay, sometimes it can also display data that is being processed, depending on which kind of user you are, whether you are a professional IT person or personnel, or you are just a lay user, right? Awesome. So it, but we just say it's an output device because it displays information to us, right? And then we have the webcam. So in this case, the webcam would be a webcam is an input device because the webcam in itself doesn't display images. Have you noticed the camera of your phone? The camera doesn't display images. It is your phone screen that produces the images that the camera takes. So in essence, the camera is feeding the monitor of your phone with information that there's someone standing there, focus on the, or that has been taking a picture of. Take this data and use it for your perusal. So with that, we can say that the webcam is an input device. Okay, it's an input. The webcam is an input device. So there you have it. The webcam is an input device. The monitor is an output device. The speakers in this case is an output device because it is not taking sound in, but it's rather producing sound, right? Which is being uh, it's rather producing sounds, right? So we say it's an output device. It brings out sounds. All right. So you have these things. So what about a keyboard? Is a keyboard an input device? A keyboard is an input device because it helps input data into the computer, right? Because the keyboard in itself doesn't display, even though um, I believe very soon keyboards in themselves will start displaying things. um, Keyboards don't display anything whatsoever. Their basic function or their primary role is to give the 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 system unit and its components that or the its processing components the data it will need to process what instruction we needed to perform, right? So the keyboard is that device that helps us to key in those data. So you see, remember the data that we saw in our slide here, where we have data, the list of the items. It is through the work of the keyboard that we enter those to to have those data in the system. And so they are also input devices. The mouse is an input device. Why? Because it doesn't display. You notice that first of all, it's not a display device. It doesn't display anything. but rather it's helping you to give direction on items that you want to select or point at. So with this, you are giving the computer instructions. You are giving it instruction. It helps you because it also helps you to select and open and do things. So you are giving instructions to the computer with the mouse, except that you are not typing it, right? So with that, it's also an input device. Okay, all right. In some cases, you can turn your mouse into a keyboard, and we are going to learn that in a different class. Anyways, so we also have a microphone based if a webcam is an input device, then the microphone definitely will be an input device as well because it will have to do with taking the data in the form of sound, right? And then converting it into digital data, right? For it to be processed and produced through the speakers as output. And so the microphone is an input device, but the speakers are output devices. Okay? All right. And then we have the communication devices, which is also the modem, right? Modem is a communication device. And so it helps you to now when you get the information that you want to transfer to your family, your friends, uh, you want to upload it to a cloud storage. Cloud storage is basically that storage that is not necessarily on your computer. I'm saying necessarily because it's in a different computer somewhere around the world, but it is not physical to you at that time. And so we upload it there through the help of the modem, which gives us access to the internet, right? To be able to do so. So every website you visit is actually stored as a file on a different computer. So when you go to the website, you are accessing someone's computer, someone's saved computer. So we see Facebook, they have their own system where they have stored their files, right? So when you visit that platform, when you open the website, you are visiting their servers, right? We call them servers, right? It's a whole, sometimes it can be a whole warehouse, right? And it's full of computers. Or let's just say, let's look at it like you see the way our system unit looks like. A bunch of them like huge, like your height. Some of them are huge, right? They don't really have monitors there, just a server room. You get it? So they have all the storage there. So as you are sitting at home typing the website, you're actually accessing those files. And by you, it comes to you as pictures. You get it? And videos and so on. Um, anyways, um, just for you to have a brief overview of how things are, right? And so communication modem helps us to access those things, right? And so we have external hard drive. So external hard drives are not inside the system unit, but they are outside of it, and they add up to the storage of the device if connected to it, right? Whether wireless or through cable, right? We also have card readers, your memory card, um, and so on, right? You can use card readers through your memory card. You can put them in the card readers and you put them in the machine. Some machines may not take the memory card directly, but through the help of the readers, you are able to put them in and have access to your your files on them. And so we say they are storage devices. So whether it's a reader or writer, you can see it here again. Aha, a reader or writer. Um, or the memory cards, they are also storage devices. Okay, So external hard disk drive or external hard disk, they are all storage devices. A memory card, you should know that it's a storage device, right? Card readers, right? So, um, yes, so these are the physical components. Uh, and now let's look at some uh, disadvantages and advantages of computers. Um, uh, Computers have come to help us a lot, but they also hold their own disadvantages, right? So one of the advantage it gives us is speed. So if I tell you to calculate something, right, the amount of time with your own mind, the amount of time you spend on it, it's would be more than if I just key in that data to the computer. The space of time you will use vis-a-vis the time that the computer will use would be quite obvious, right? And so you would realize that the computer helps us to do things faster. And so this is why we seem to resort to computers to our aid when it comes to these calculations and anything that the human mind seems not to be abreast with, right? Fast enough. Okay, so it obviously gives us speed. One of the things it also does is that it's also reliable. A human being can fall sick, like the way I'm ill right now. You get it? Um, but the computer doesn't fall sick. You see, it might, if it is not performing well, it will be as a result of you not taking care of it. Uh, like, I mean, maintaining it. Because if you throw dust in the computer over time or you pour water in it, you don't expect it to work, obviously, right? Because it has to do with electricity as a source of its own power, right? And so it's very reliable. You count so far as it's in good condition, you just give it the instruction and it goes on and on without stopping. It doesn't get tired. So it has a certain level of reliability against the human labor, right? Anyways, so this is what the computer brings on board. Speed, reliability is also consistent because when you give it the instruction, I was talking earlier on and I mentioned that an IT term called looping, right? And so you can just give it or program it in such a way that for thousands of years it will just continue to be on a loop. So provided it has a good power source and every condition of its maintenance is met within that period, it will consistently produce that same quantity, that same result over a period of time, right? So we say it brings in consistency. It doesn't get tired. You see, it will continue and go on and on. Okay, all right. It also provides storage. Computers are known to nowadays to have large capacities of storage. They bring on board the ability for humans to store events as and when they happen in real life. And so these are some of the advantages. Gone were the days that if something happens, when you only have to see it once and it will never happen again and you don't have records of it. And it has to be rather told through generations, through stories. And we all know what happens if they are told through words or stories. Over time, they get to change, right? And when they get to change, because everybody will now say it according to how they benefit, that will benefit their culture or something. You get it? Huh. So over time, you just lose the actual or maybe crucial part of the story, which may make sense, and it will be filled with a lot of other things that may not make sense. And so having it stored, you will get to know what actually happened, and computer computers bring this to bear to all of us. Okay, like I said, if you have a question, um, AJ can put my number there. They can reach out with the questions. Okay, I want to just get on with this thing, the first half, and then we continue. Maybe God willing tomorrow. Um, is is Honorable Felicia here? UGBS 104. Okay. I think I may have a different class tomorrow to teach. Anyways, but I'll try and have a continuation of this class tomorrow, God willing. All right. Powerful. So, but you can send in your questions via my WhatsApp line, and it will be posted maybe in the chat room so that the phone number so that you can have access. All right. Okay. So, storage. I've talked about storage. Now, communications, right? Now, computers helps us to communicate to loved ones across the oceans, right? With the advent of computers, we are able to reach out to people who are very far from us. Those days, we used to give it to birds to transport for us, and that's how come you have these love songs, Anoma or Chomo, as we say in our local parlance. The bird that is passing by, you take a letter to go and give to my loved one. Hey, my God. Anyways, so imagine we were in those days. So you see, if the bird is sick, so imagine if the bird is sick and you have tied this heavy thing on its leg, which is weighing it. Maybe throughout the journey, it was chased by a falcon. Maybe you sent a bird that has a higher uh, predator on its food chain, on the animal food chain, and it goes to fight, and maybe it loses some strength. It still has this and has to deliver. You see, sometimes the birds don't reach their destination, and they maybe pass out or something. You see, so they were not communication in those days wasn't really reliable. Sometimes too, you could send it through people who were traveling to other places, and you tell them to leave it when they get to a certain junction. What if they change their course? So these were all these um, risks in those days that were hindering communication. You get it? So you were not sure entirely. It's almost as if whenever you sent or you wanted to communicate to someone, you had to if there was like a lower percentage in it reaching its destination or its audience. And even when it gets to the audience, the person even replying back, it will take another set of years for it to get back to the initial sender of the message, right? For it to complete the communication cycle. So, which is the feedback. So it's it was a very, very difficult period, all right? Um, but they adjusted to it. They may not have known, but with the advent of computers, you can see that communication where someone would sit at one corner, you just take the phone and dial someone's number. Even if it is a different country, they add the country code, and then it goes to the network, and the network sends to the satellite sends it to the person, and then it continues back to where it came from. And it's all done in a few seconds. You see, so it goes to the tower, you see, then the tower sends it. So um, now it has been made so simple for us. So advantages, these are some of the things. All right. I believe I've explained these things enough for you to have more advantages of computers, right? But it also has its own risk. All right. Now it has health risks. Now because of the usage of these wireless stuff for communication, right? There are a lot of waves or radiation in the system because when you have these unseen connections in the atmosphere. Because wherever you are sitting listening to me right now, believe it or not, there are signals in your room or in your area or on your compound. Do you get it? Where you have signals from radio stations on your compound, you have signals passing through TV signals, police uh, radio signals, police radio signals, like basically DSTV signals, even signals that we don't benefit in this country, they are passing through Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, they are all there in the system. Even recently, I got to realize that even your turning fan in your room produces signals. That's how come some of you, your TV, when you turn on the fan, you see your TV goes off and it comes back. Hmm. Your fan contains electromagnetic this thing that helps it to turn, right? And so when you press your remote, it gets confused. Is it when you turn on the fan, the regulator of the fan on the wall thinks that it has turned into a remote, and so your TV begins to receive the signals from the fan because it's also emitting its own signals. Okay, so now almost everything that has this electromagnetic stuff and or radiation or signals are all over there, and these things are not healthy for humans consumption, right? But we are living in it, we are passing through, you see, and these things emit radiation in a way. When you are exposed to it for a longer period, it affects your risk. The other time when I was having a session, I had a time to explain this into details, right? But you can look or do your research into this, and you're going to find out how detrimental these things are. Those of you who keep the phone around you all the time, it is very dangerous. Try to stay away from you when you are sleeping. All right. Awesome. Violation of privacy. Now, with the advent of these things, you have a lot of companies wanting to let their company produce products that is customer centered, that meets the needs, tailors the needs of the consumers. And so they need every information they will get hold of. And so these companies begin to look for these telcos, whether MTN or the phone producers, or I mean the mobile phone manufacturers, okay? And they begin to, because they are dealing with these people who have your data, whether the phone manufacturer or the telco you are using, whether MTN or Vodafone or Telecel, sorry. uh you they would Some of these companies, I dare say, are engaged in data theft. And I've not mentioned any company's name actually, but some of them low key, that's what they do to get their business running, because they have to rely on the former ones, they will not get the monies they need. And so they sell these data that you have. So imagine you have your contacts. So some of you, if you go to your contacts, or those of you who are able to turn off the data of particular apps, you realize that sometimes your phone app, I mean the app that you use to call, sometimes the data is turned on and you are like, what does a phone call app need data for if it is not true caller or something? You get it? So some of these companies are involved in selling your contacts. So sometimes this is how come you're able to receive adverts on your phone that looks as if it's talking about something you have spoken to about someone or with someone, because it's either the phone is listening to you or the camera was open without you knowing, because the phone manufacturer allows it without you seeing. And so a lot of people have had problems with these companies on their privacy issues, because the phones, that's why a lot of people prefer iPhones, because the Android people seem to continuously violate their users' privacy. So if you don't know IT or these some of these things or not abreast with cybersecurity issues. Um, may not know this, but people sue these companies and they earn a lot of money. Some people have also made it a business where they keep you. So this has become an industry headache, right? Violation of privacy, which is also very, very important, right? All right. Some people, as a result, have also made it their career that they will go into this since it has become the new normal, right? So uh, how do you call it? A venture that fetches money. What's the term for it? Yes, it reaps the money. So you go and do law and you enter into IT and you do law and then you be defending users, you get money. So it has become a disadvantage, right, in the usage of computers. Public safety, right? Where you have a computer that can hit some of us, our computers, the way they can hit, you realize that it's more than even the heater you use at home to cook. And these things are on your laps. You see, they can cause publicity. Some of them too, they have speakers that can really, really make noise. Some computers can have certain lights or displays that may not be conducive to a group of people in a certain geographical area. You know, some people may be not, they may be sensitive to lighting, the way things will light and be flashing. We have people like that. I've forgotten the sickness. Anyway, so these things can also, um, in a way, cause the public to be unsafe because they may be walking by the roadside and these flashing lights from computers may blind them. And also with the usage of infrared lights, we have people who are sensitive to these things and it can cause damage in wherever they find themselves, right? So impact on labor force. It, uh, as we were talking about reliability, you should also talk about the labor force reduction because since computers have become reliable and people are depending on them, CEOs, company owners, entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs are now depending on them, right? And so uh, people have begun to lose their jobs at their various places, right? It's quite worrying because uh, careers like photography are now dying out. Now it's almost as if everybody is now a photographer. So imagine a career that people used to value. Those days, if they say the photographer is coming, hey, the photographer was more than a family friend. Oh, back in those days, and the way they would charge the family, it was a whole career that fed people and took people to schools for years until the advent of um, uh, computers such as our phones and so on came in, and now everybody can take pictures with their phone. Everybody can do studio works, Photoshop stuff on their phones, their computers, and just be on, right? So it has hugely affected labor force, impact on the environment, right? Now we have people who are so focused on computers that they don't partake in communal activities because they have become antisocial. They don't take part in those things. It has impacted heavily on their social life, right? Uh-huh. So if it is affecting them in their social life, then it's also affecting the environment itself because if there's a work that is supposed to be done on the environment to keep it safe for everyone to be able to live in, and you are not partaking in it because you are focused on TikTok, right? TikTok, right? So these things are taking people's time, and so it's therefore limiting that social life that people used to have back in the days when there were no computers. And so these are some of the advantages and disadvantages um, we highlighted. All right, so advantages and disadvantages of using. So we also going into details a bit. We have green computing. So what is green computing? It involves reducing electricity consumed and environmental waste generated when using a computer. So you want to use computers in a way that it will not take too much light, because when you are taking too much light, you are putting pressure on, let's say, the person who produces the power, your power source, to produce more. And depending on what type of power they are using, they are damaging the environment to give you that power. And so there's a need to conserve power, or to utilize that small power to give you the maximum power. And the process of managing this is what we call green computing. So you are involving yourself in green computing, right? So you want to avoid wastage. You want to avoid wastage, and in a whole sense, preserve the environment, right? So waste generated when using a computer. So sometimes when your computer is on, you see that you have something saver, battery saver or something. You can actually turn the battery saver on when you are using your phone or your PC, when and it is 100%. Okay, it will also help you involve yourself in green computing. You manage the power. If your light is too bright, you can reduce it, right? Depending on your health condition on your eyes, right? And so on and so forth, so that you can manage power, you can manage electricity, right? Awesome. So this is what we call green computing. Involves in reducing electricity consumed, right, and environmental wastage, uh, right? Awesome. So what are some of the strategies to involve yourself in computing? When you involve yourself in recycling, by involving yourself in green computing. So uh, you recycling, it could be your batteries. Now, normally you are not supposed to burn your phone batteries. You're supposed to have a place where we submit them so that it could be recycled. Some of them can be, a lot of them can be recycled to do other things, or the same things, right? But in Ghana, we don't seem to have that for batteries. So we burn them, which is also dangerous to the environment, right? It explodes when you get it close to fire. It explodes like real this thing, and if it touches your body, I mean, just really get hurt. So you need to be careful, right? So recycling helps a lot. Okay. Um, we have regulating manufacturing processes, right? Regulating manufacturing processes. So if you have these companies who are using high-end electrical machines, we have to have, as a country, we need to have laws that will govern the way or the usage of power or electricity within these um, industries, in a way that will not affect their profits, because if they are earning, the country to earn, right? So it has to be measured and it has to make sense, because just because you are getting the money doesn't also mean you should damage the environment, as our galamseyers, some of them are doing. Okay. So let's be measured. All right. So recycling strategies, recycling, regulating the companies, right? Manufacturing processes. So regulating the companies, right? And giving them laws on how to do things, to help them to keep them in shape on how to do something. Okay. And so we have extending the life of uh, computers, right? Okay. So when we engage in extending the life of computers, it will help us to, in a way, preserve the the creation of entirely new one, which will involve in going to cut down trees because some parts of the computers are plastics, and we all know where plastics come from. In Ghana, we have these rubber plants coming from Takwa and those areas, right? Uh, these plants are exported, and this is what they use to produce these rubbers, and some of them go into these things, right? They mix it with other things, of course. And so when we preserve the life of computers, right, we prevent the habit of throwing it away for the company to go and fetch new natural resources to reproduce them, which will end in environmental degradation, right? And so let's be cautious, all right? Immediately donating or properly disposing of or of replaced computers. So when we donate it, right, to people to use it, if it's working and we donate to people, obviously they will continue to use them. If they also had money to buy, maybe they will not buy it, they will keep it and they will use it, right? And also, if you were supposed to go and burn it too, you will not go and burn it and it will damage the environment because the smoke, the CO2 damages the ozone layer, as we've said, right? So many years. So it's very, very important to take note of this, right? Properly disposing it to as well. And we would um, be engaged through all these things. So recycling, regulating manufacturing processes, extending the life of computers, immediately donating, right? These are the strategies that are involved in green computing, saving the environment and reducing electricity consumed. This is green computing. And so, with that being said, I think we will end it here today, right? Um, we'll continue tomorrow, God willing. Thank you very much. There's a small piece of announcement. This